Welcome back. We've got a bit more work to do on really understanding some of the main concepts around research. And we've sought to kind of introduce you to these concepts in a number of ways. We've been pushing you in the direction of reference books that you can be reading, handbooks that you can be referring to. Some of these reference books have got very recently produced, well-worded glossaries and introductions to these important concepts. But we're going to be just looking through some of the contributions in this very, very good book, Qualitative Research, an Introduction to Methods and Designs, and it's co-authored by Stephen Lapin. And we're going to be looking at another summary of the different research tools that we use when we are doing qualitative, specifically qualitative research. Remember, our course is specifically about ethnographic research methods, and ethnographic research methods are one of the main parts of qualitative research. Ethnographic research involves a number of tools, but let's go to full screen and have a look at some of the tools that we've got here. So we're going to go into full screen now so we can have a look at some of the qualitative research tools. Lapin and his colleagues, his co-authors, provide some suggestions about when to choose these individual tools, and he is providing some specific advice about using these in community level studies as well as individual studies. You may be watching this video at the time when you're actually preparing yourself about how you are going to do, you may be preparing your research plan. You may be at that stage in your research process. So, as we've mentioned a number of times, because we've done so, we can do this very, very briefly. Observation is an important research tool, and this is open-ended, and that comes in many forms. And although we talk most commonly about participant observation, we need to remember, and we will reinforce this later, that actually observation comes in a number of forms, which includes a non-participatory observation, where you are looking at things that you are not actually actively involved in. And so on a community level, this means observing activities and interactions in public spaces. For example, when I lived in Patani for many years, I spent time out in coffee shops learning Thai and Malay, as well as getting to know my neighbours. I was sometimes participating, and other times I wasn't participating, I was just observing. There are times when you do this as an individual, and we often choose to observe as an individual when we're wanting to identify possible dimensions or variation amongst individuals in the community that we are absorbing. At a community level, we do observation when we are wanting to collect general information about the community, the demography, the history, the context in which rituals are happening in this community. There's also this participatory type of observation, and that is when we actively engage in and document routines. It may be in a household or a community or a school, and on an individual level it's when we participate in daily routines or activities. And we do this to understand through direct personal experience the differences in ways that ordinary people, they do things. There is another type of observation which has been included, and that is called structured observation. This is more, as the name suggests, more structured, where we are looking for systematic, observable similarities and differences. We often do this by doing a checklist. This is often something that we do later on because we have spent time doing unstructured, non-participatory and participatory observation. When we do this on an individual level, we do this for a number of reasons. For example, when to understand through quantification the different ways that people behave in settings or over time. This complements both an open-ended, non-participatory and a participatory observation. There are more options, and we will be doing quite a bit of work on interviews and the distinctive features of an ethnographic interview. So in-depth interviews come in a range of forms, and the first is that they are open-ended. For individuals, asking interview questions and topics flow from interests of the interviewer and the interviewee. And we do this to obtain pilot data using an informal or unfinished interview schedule to explore a particular topic. In addition to open-ended interviews, where this complements observation. Open-ended interviews complement observation. We look, we listen, we don't talk that much. Following this, we ask open-ended questions. This is different from a semi-structured interview, which is not completely open-ended because there are specific questions that we want to ask. They cover specific topics, and when we do this on an individual level, it helps us to when we're doing semi-structured interviews with individuals. This is a very important thing to do when we are using a common list of topics with corresponding open-ended questions to identify intra-group differences in expressions, for example. The third type of in-depth interview is not open-ended, that's what we do initially, not semi-structured when we've done a bit of analysis of our data and we've begun to do some coding, we've begun to see some themes, and that has led us to observe different things and has led us to start to ask more open-ended questions. But after we've done semi-structured interviews, we've really begun to have an argument, we've begun to have a provisional thesis, we know where the gaps in our data are, and so when we do structured interviews, this helps us really hone in on the specific quantifiable or qualifiable data on specific topics, whether that be for the community or the individual. There is a distinction made by these authors between focused in-depth interviews and structured, and we can see the reasons for people doing that. On an individual level, focus group interviews are not held with individuals. Revealing personal information is not encouraged in focus groups. So focus group in-depth interviews are used, usually it's the last thing that you do if you were pursuing an ethnographic study, where you get people together and you get people together in a group to talk. We will be talking a bit about focus groups and the advantages and disadvantages of them later on. Okay, we can go out of full screen now. So we've touched a number of issues in this lecture, and let's go to the X-Mind, let's go to the X-Mind now and point you in the direction of places that you could be reading if you needed to know more. So thanks for watching. Bye for now.